The sun was melting into the jagged horizon, casting long golden shadows over the parched land. Dust curled in lazy swirls behind the hooves of a chestnut mare as she carried a man hardened by sun, silence, and sorrow. Jebediah, cross-rancher, widower, and father rode alone down the trail that led from the dry, cracked flats into the edges of Apache land. Jeb had the look of a man carved from the very desert itself, leathery skin, gray-streaked beard, and eyes as cold as creek water in spring. He'd buried his wife 2 winters ago after fever took her, and he'd done his best to raise little Sarah alone. But a ranch doesn't wait for grief to pass, and neither do cattle. By the time Sarah turned 7, she'd learned to cook over fire, tend goats, and patch her own dresses. She was strong, like her ma, but strength ain't the same as having a mother. And Jeb knew it. That's what brought him here, out past the safe ridges, where few white men dared go alone. In a small Apache camp just beyond a narrow gorge, he met a trader named Miguel Ortega, wiry mustached, half Mexican, half troublemaker who had a reputation for dealing in things most folks pretended didn't happen. Miguel's fire crackled under a black pot of beans as Jeb dismounted. "You come for cattle or something less common?" Miguel asked, chewing on a reed. "I come for wives," Jeb said flatly, spitting dust from his mouth. Miguel squinted, then grinned. "You always this romantic?" Jeb didn't smile. "I got a daughter. She needs a mother. I got $6 and a warm house with no woman in it. You tell me what that buys." Miguel leaned back on his saddle, thinking. Behind him, 3 Apache women sat cross-legged near a fire, their faces expressionless, eyes flicking toward the stranger. They were young, but not girls, each with the quiet grace of desert-born women. One had a scar along her jaw, another held a child, and the third, tall and proud, stared directly at Jeb, unblinking. "They ain't slaves," Miguel said finally, "but they owe debt. Tribe gave 'em up to settle things. You treat 'em right." "I treat all livin' things under my roof with respect," Jeb replied, "but I ain't gonna lie and say this is love. This is need, plain and true." Miguel nodded slowly. 3 for $6. That's to each. Take 'em. If they walk away, that's your problem." Jeb reached into his coat, pulled out $6 silver, and dropped them into Miguel's hand. The sound they made was sharp and final, like the slamming of a coffin lid. The women stood, gathering their few belanja blanket, a pouch, a bone-handled knife. None of them spoke. The tall one approached first, holding her head high. "You speak English?" Jeb asked. She nodded. "Some. What's your name?" "I had a name," she said. "You give new one now." Jeb scratched his beard, uncomfortable. "Then I'll call you Mercy." The woman gave no sign of what she thought of that. Behind her, the others came forward. One was named Bluebird by Miguel, the other had no name he could pronounce, so Jeb called her Rose. He tied their bundles to the back of his horse and started the long ride home. That night, beneath a sky pricked with stars, the desert wind whispered through the canyons. Jeb didn't speak much as they camped. Mercy stared at the flames, while Rose hummed to her baby and Bluebird cleaned the dust from her feet. They were quiet, but not afraid. Not yet. Jeb sat with his rifle across his knees, wondering if he'd made a deal with fate or with the devil. $6 for 3 lives, and the weight of it settled heavy on his shoulders. But tomorrow, they'd cross into his land, and that was where the real story would begin. The dawn broke slow and hesitant over the endless plains, casting pale pinks and golds across the dust-choked air. Jeb cross-stirred in his worn bedroll, the sharp taste of last night's campfire smoke still clinging to his throat. The 3 women lay nearby, Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose, each wrapped in blankets against the chill, their faces quiet but watchful in the morning light. The ride back to the ranch was long and grueling. The horses' hooves stirred up clouds of dust that trailed behind like ghosts of the past. Weaving through the rough brush and thorny mesquite, Jeb led the way, every muscle tight with the tension of what lay ahead. Bringing the women back wasn't just about filling a void at the house, it was about survival. His daughter Sarah needed more than a father's love. She needed a mother's care, someone to teach her the unspoken ways of life, to soften the rough edges of a hard world. Weather-worn silhouette of the Cross Ranch finally rose against the horizon, an uneven cluster of wooden buildings nestled in a shallow valley. Jeb felt the weight in his chest ease just a little. It was a humble place, a low creaking farmhouse with peeling white paint, a weather-beaten barn, and a corral with restless cattle that knew no peace. The land stretched far and wide, harsh and unforgiving. But it was home. Sarah was waiting on the porch, her small hands clutching a doll made of cloth scraps, eyes bright with curiosity and hope. She ran to Jeb the moment he pulled the reins of his horse to a stop. "Pa, Who are they? She asked, glancing shyly at the three women standing quietly by the horses. These are your new friends, Jeb said, voice soft but steady. They're here to help us. Sarah nodded slowly, her wide eyes taking in Mercy's strong gaze, Bluebird's gentle smile, and Rose's quiet calm. Will they teach me? She asked. They will, Jeb promised. Inside the house, the walls smelled of dried leather and old wood smoke. The women were led to a small room at the back, where the sunlight filtered through dusty curtains, warming the floorboards. It was a simple space, but safe. Mercy ran her fingers over the rough-hewn table, tracing the grain as if it told stories she wished she could understand. Over the next few days, the women settled into the rhythms of the ranch. Rose took to the kitchen with quiet grace, learning to bake bread and cook stews from the few scraps they had. Bluebird tended the garden, coaxing life from stubborn earth with patient hands. Mercy shadowed Sarah and Jeb, learning their words, their customs, watching the land and the cattle with sharp eyes, but the shadows that clung to their pasts refused to fade. One evening, Jeb sat by the fire, watching the flames dance in the cool air. Mercy approached him slowly, her voice low and steady. You buy us for $6, she said, but we are not things to own. Jeb looked up, tired lines etched deep across his face. I know, I'm sorry. This is a hard life for all of us. We owe our tribe. They said we must leave. If we stay, it is death. But here, your land. It is not our home. Jeb nodded. Maybe not, but it can be a place to live, to build something new. Mercy's eyes flickered with something fierce, a fire kindled not by the campfire, but by survival itself. We will see, she said. Meanwhile, Sarah grew attached to her new companions. Her laughter, once scarce, now echoed through the small rooms as Rose taught her to sew, and Bluebird sang soft songs of the wind and earth. For the first time in years, Jeb heard joy in his daughter's voice. Yet, the outside world remained unkind. Rumors of the Apache brides spread through nearby settlements, drawing curious glances and wary whispers. Some saw Jeb as brave, others as foolish, or worse. And the danger was never fair, a reminder that the frontier was no place for softness. But Jeb had made his choice. For $6 and the promise of a mother for his daughter, he would face whatever came next. The land was harsh, the past was heavy, but there was hope yet in the eyes of three women who refused to be broken. The morning sun poured harsh light over the Cross Ranch, illuminating the dust motes swirling in the cool air. The peaceful routine of the ranch hid a restless undercurrent, one that stirred like the desert winds before a storm. Jeb Cross stood at the edge of his corral, watching his cattle graze, ears alert for any sounds out of place. Since bringing Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose into his home, life had grown busier but also more complicated. The women moved about with quiet purpose, their faces often cast in shadow when they thought no one watched. Mercy had grown particularly distant, spending long hours at the creek where the water ran cold and clear. One evening, Jeb found her staring into the ripples, her jaw tight as if wrestling memories she wished to drown. I see the weight you carry, Jeb said quietly, stepping beside her. The past don't go easy for no one. Mercy's eyes met his, steady and unyielding. I was stolen. Long ago, she said, voice low. Taken from my family, forced to live where I did not belong. My name was not Mercy then, it was Ahuli. I fought to keep my spirit, but each day it was harder. Jeb nodded, the ache of his own losses making his throat tight. You're safe here. Safe, she repeated, then glanced toward the distant hills where smoke curled faintly. But I fear what follows. Trouble had begun to stir beyond the ranch. Word spread in nearby towns about Jeb's Apache brides, drawing suspicion and hostility. Some neighbors muttered that he was soft or worse, consorting with enemies. One afternoon, a group of rough men rode up, their faces twisted in scorn. They were ranchers from a nearby settlement, hardened men who saw the land as theirs by right. We hear you brought Apache women here. Their leader sneered, spitting tobacco into the dirt. You're askin' for trouble, Cross. Jeb's hand hovered near his rifle. They're part of my family now. I won't have you threatening them. The men laughed, loud and cruel. Family, you're throwing your lot in with savages. Don't expect the town to stand with you. Bluebird stepped forward, her calm voice cutting through the tension. We are not your enemies. We seek only peace. As night fell, the family gathered around the fire, sharing stories and songs that blended the old world and the new. Stars sparkled overhead, vast and eternal, witnesses to their journey. Jeb looked at Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose, the women who had come into his life for $6 but had given back so much more. This is home, he said softly, and for the first time in a long while, the promise of tomorrow felt real. The men jeered again but rode off, leaving a cloud of dust and a warning that unsettled the ranch's fragile peace. That night, Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose gathered by the fire, voices hushed. "We must be strong," Mercy said. "This land is not only hard from the earth but from men's hearts." Rose, the quietest, nodded. "We have survived worse. Together, we can protect this place." Sarah, overhearing from the doorway, clutched her doll tightly. She looked to Mercy with wide, trusting eyes. "Will the bad men come back?" she asked. Mercy knelt, placing a gentle hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Not if we stand strong." Jeb watched from the shadows, heart heavy with the knowledge that the fight for his family was only beginning. The frontier was unforgiving, but so were they, and as long as he had breath in his body, no one would take away what little hope they had built. The sun climbed high over the cross ranch, beating down on the dusty earth and setting the wooden buildings ablaze with heat. Inside the small farmhouse, the hum of life was growing louder. Soft footsteps, the clink of pots, and laughter that was once a rare sound in Jeb's household. Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose had begun weaving themselves into the fabric of ranch life. Each day brought new lessons: how to mend a fence, how to soothe a restless calf, how to draw water from the well without spilling a drop. But beyond the chores, they were learning the unspoken ways of a family reborn from hardship. Sarah's eyes shone with wonder and delight. Under Mercy's patient hand, she was learning to cook stew and braid sweetgrass. Bluebird taught her how to listen to the wind and recognize the scents of rain. Rose showed her the delicate art of sewing, stitching scraps of cloth into clothes that fit and told stories. One morning, Sarah tugged at Jeb's sleeve, holding up a small bundle wrapped in soft cloth. "Pa," she said shyly, "Mercy and Bluebird and Rose made this for you." Inside the bundle lay a hand-carved wooden horse, rough but shaped with care. Jeb's eyes softened as he knelt to hug his daughter close. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. "You all have done more than I could have hoped for." But the peaceful days were edged with unease. The warning from the rough men had lingered like a storm cloud, and other visitors brought whispers of trouble. One evening, a rider from the nearby town came bearing grim news. A group of bounty hunters had been hired to track down and capture the women, their value rumored high among those who sought to profit from the unsettled lands. Jeb met the rider outside the barn, his jaw set like iron. "They want to take them back to sell them, maybe worse," the rider said. Jeb's fists clenched. "Not on my watch." The women gathered around the fire that night, faces illuminated by flickering flames. "We knew the past would come hunting," Mercy said, voice steady, "but we are no longer running." Bluebird nodded, eyes bright. "This is our home." Rose's calm voice carried strength. "Together, we will face what comes." Jeb stood, rifle in hand. "If they want to come, they'll find a man who's got more grit than gold." The night stretched long, the fire burning low. Outside, the wind whispered through the sagebrush, carrying the scent of sage and smoke and a promise that the fight for their future was just beginning. The Cross Ranch sat under a brooding sky, the kind that pressed heavy on a man's soul. The wind had shifted, carrying the sharp scent of gunpowder and dust, and with it came a threat darker than any they'd faced before. Jeb Cross stood on the porch, rifle across his knees, eyes scanning the horizon. The three women were inside, tending to Sarah, whose laughter had grown but now softened with caution. Tonight, peace was a fragile thing. The first hoofbeats came in the distance, low and steady. Jeb's breath caught. He slipped off the porch and moved toward the corral, where his horses shifted nervously. Three riders emerged from the dust, silhouettes sharp against the fading light. Their faces were hard, sun-baked and cruel, eyes cold as the steel they carried. "Bounty hunters." The leader, a lean man with a crooked grin and a black hat tipped low, called out, "Jeb Cross. We're here for the Apache women. Hand 'em over, and no one gets hurt." Jeb's voice was calm but carried the weight of a man who'd faced death before. "They're under my protection. You'll not find what you're looking for." The hunters laughed, spurs jangling. "We've got a contract, and we intend to collect." Inside the house, Mercy, Bluebird, and Rose readied themselves quietly. Mercy checked her knife. Bluebird secured Sarah's small hands in hers, and Rose prepared a simple medicine kit, knowing the coming fight could bring wounds. The first shot rang out, sharp and echoing through the valley. Jeb fired back, taking cover behind the barn. The other hunters dismounted, guns drawn, moving with practiced precision. The dry earth erupted in clouds of dust and shattered wood. Mercy slipped through the back door with Sarah, moving toward the rocky outcroppings near the creek. Bluebird and Rose followed, their movements swift and sure. Jeb stayed behind, covering their retreat. Each breath was a prayer, each shot a promise to protect what he'd fought so hard to build. The skirmish lasted what felt like hours but was only minutes. When the dust settled, the hunters were gone chasing shadows and whispers into the night. The ranch lay silent but scarred splintered boards, hoofprints in the dirt, and the heavy weight of what had almost been lost. Jeb looked at the women returning, weary but unbroken. Mercy's eyes met his, fierce and unyielding. "We fight to live," she said. "And live we shall," Jeb replied, a new fire kindling in his chest. The dawn would bring new challenges, but for now, the Cross Ranch was home hard-won and fiercely guarded. The morning sun rose gently over the Cross Ranch, casting soft light across the bruised earth and shattered boards. The battle had left its mark, but it hadn't broken their spirit. Jeb Cross moved carefully through the yard, inspecting the damage while keeping an eye on the horizon. The bounty hunters had fled, but the threat still lingered like a shadow. He felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever, protecting his family from a world that didn't always want them safe. Inside the house, Mercy tended to Sarah's scraped knees, her hands gentle despite the fierce strength they held. Bluebird boiled water for bandages, humming softly as Rose prepared a stew to soothe the aches in their bodies. The women worked together with a quiet harmony born of shared struggle. They were no longer just three lost souls brought for $6, they were pillars of a new family, each filling a role shaped by courage and care. Sarah watched them with wide eyes, learning lessons deeper than any words could teach. Jeb sat by the fire that evening, feeling the warmth seep into his bones. Mercy joined him, the flickering flames reflecting in her dark eyes. "You saved them," she said softly, nodding toward the women inside. "We saved each other," Jeb replied. "A man can't stand alone on this land." Mercy's gaze softened. "And a family is more than blood." The days that followed were filled with work and laughter, lessons and stories told beneath starlit skies. Mercy shared tales of her people, their songs, their struggles, the beauty that survived even in the harshest deserts. Bluebird taught Sarah how to read the sky, predicting storms and seasons. Rose's gentle hands mended clothes and spirits alike. Neighbors who had once whispered turned curious, then respectful. Slowly, the Cross Ranch became a place of refuge, not just for Jeb's family, but for those who needed a chance to belong. But the past never fully disappeared. Letters arrived from distant places, reminding Mercy of debts unpaid and dangers looming. The peace they'd carved out was fragile, a delicate dance on the edge of the wild. Yet, under the vast western sky, they faced the future with steady hearts. Together, the Cross Ranch woke to a dawn painted with soft oranges and pinks. The air crisp and clear after days of hard rain. The land drank deep, and with it, so did the hearts of those who called this rugged place home. Jeb Cross stood on the porch, shoulders squared against the morning chill, watching Sarah play near the corral with Bluebird teaching her the names of wildflowers. Mercy and Rose worked together inside, their laughter spilling out through open windows like music carried on the wind. The scars of the past, the battles, the fears, the harsh judgments had not vanished, but they had been worn down like river stones, smooth and steady. The ranch had transformed from a place of survival to a place of belonging. Word had spread far and wide. A man who dared to stand for his family, and 3 women who refused to be broken. Some came seeking shelter, others to find a fresh start. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, a rider appeared on the trail, a messenger from the nearby town. He brought news that the bounty hunters had been arrested, their cruel enterprise dismantled by those who saw justice beyond prejudice. Jeb nodded, relief mingling with resolve. "The fight is never truly over," he said, "but this land, it's ours now." Mercy joined him, her eyes reflecting the endless sky. "We have roots here," she said, "deep ones, like the mesquite trees." Rose handed Sarah a freshly sewn doll, a symbol of the life they were building, one stitched with hope, courage, and love.